The sound of war roused Eli Thompson. The valley echoed with the sound of drums, but when he emerged from his shack, 30 armed combatants remained still as statues. They turned their painted faces toward his door. Not one moved, not one spoke. They just stared at him, eyes heavy with truths he could never understand. He had only been there yesterday. No one, a boy, an orphan, working food storage for scraps, and now the most feared tribe in the region stood in silence around his home. Guardians of a secret born in blood and war. How had helping one lost girl changed everything so completely? The long shadows behind the warriors stretched like claws, and Eli's thoughts rushed back to the day before he had been walking down the stream bed, searching for anything the spring floods might have swept from the mountains. When he heard it, a sound thin and trembling, a child sobbing. Drifting among the cottonwoods, most folks from Cedar Hollow would have turned away. Native problems meant white problems, and white problems meant death. But that sound tugged at the hollow inside his chest. The place where family should have been. Eli followed the creek upstream, and he saw her, tucked under a fallen log, a girl, 14 maybe, her skin smudged and scraped, her dark hair tangled with dirt and leaves, blood streaked from her forehead, and in her eyes that look, wild, desperate. Hunted, she recoiled. The moment she saw him like a trapped animal, whispering fast in a language he didn't know, but Eli held up his hands and said gently, slowly, "There. I won't hurt you," the girl gasped, chest heaving, staring at his face. Then, in broken English, she whispered, "Help, please, family, lost." Eli's heart clenched. He knew what it meant to be lost, to have nowhere to go, nowhere to be. "Where is your family?" he asked, and she pointed north, toward the mountains, tears filling her eyes, cheeks streaked with mud. "The storm, we split up, I climbed out. But I cannot find the path." Every instinct screamed at Eli to run. Helping a native girl would paint a target on his back. Samuel Crow and his boys had already called him useless orphan waste, and now they'd have a reason to do worse than spit words. But looking into her terrified eyes, Eli saw himself, age 8, standing at the graves of his parents. No one left, nowhere to turn. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ayanna," she whispered. "I'm Eli, and we'll find your family." But while Eli helped her to her feet, a figure watched from the ridge above. Samuel Crow, his hateful eyes narrowed, already spinning this moment into a weapon he could use. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, but they were nothing compared to the storm coming for Cedar Hollow. Eli, the boy no one ever cared about, was about to become the most important person in two very different worlds. But first, he had to keep Ayanna alive. That meant crossing a line. Drenched in blood, where native and settler killed each other without mercy, Eli led Ayanna behind his shack, into Miller's stable, her steps slow, favoring her left leg. Every motion wrapped in pain, but she kept going, grit in her teeth, something fierce, something proud. She reminded Eli of a wounded hawk he'd once found. Broken but unwilling to bow. "We need to clean that cut," he said, helping her onto the only chair in his tiny room, a place with nothing more than a narrow mattress, old crates and a rusty pot, but for now it was shelter. Ayanna looked around, then at him. "Do you live alone?" "Since I was 8, Eli replied, pumping water from the well. "Fever took my parents. Town's been all I've known since." Something shifted in Ayanna's eyes. A quiet understanding passed between them. She knew loss, too. He cleaned her wound with a damp cloth, and she didn't flinch, just winced slightly, pain tight around her eyes. "Your family?" Eli asked, softly. "Where were you headed? How many?" 15 or 20, she said. "My father, Dakota. Our chief, we trade with settlements north. The storm hit. I fell into the river. When I climbed out, they were gone." If her father was a chief, she wouldn't be left behind. Warriors would be searching, and if they found her here with Eli, a white boy, things would go bad, fast. "How long have you been missing?" he asked. Ayanna held up 3 fingers. 3 days. Eli's mind raced. None of the outcomes were good. Takakota soldiers would be scouring the land. Samuel Crow would stir fear like dry grass in fire, and scared men made violent choices. A loud knock thundered at the door. They froze. Eli motioned for Ayanna to stay silent. Footsteps circled his shack through a crack in the wall. He saw Samuel's grim face. "Open up, boy," Crow's voice barked, filled with a man used to being obeyed. Got questions that need answering. Eli's heart pounded. If Samuel found Ayanna, he'd drag her to town, parade her as a threat, bait for her father's warriors. Or worse, an example, what do you want, Mr. Crow? Eli called, positioning himself between Ayanna and the window. Spotted you near the creek? Seen anything strange? Indian tracks? But Ayanna's eyes went wide in terror. She raised a shaking finger toward the window outside. 3 more figures stood in the sunlight. But these were no locals. They moved like shadows given form, faces painted in black and red. Battle Paint Ayanna's breathing grew shallow, panicked. Bad men, she whispered. Take me. Never see father again. Samuel's knocking grew louder. I know you're in there. Open up or I break the door down. Eli's mind was a storm if Samuel got in. Ayanna was done if the warriors outside moved. She was gone and he, a 16-year-old with nothing but a dull blade and borrowed courage, had to choose, I'm getting dressed? Eli called, give me a minute. Outside, the warriors melted back into the trees, but Eli felt their eyes. Waiting Ayanna tugged his sleeve. Back window, we run to creek. I know place to hide. It was a desperate plan. But better than dying, Eli looked at her, this fierce girl, who'd survived 3 days alone, and saw something he'd never had, someone worth standing for. All right, he said, but we stay together. No matter what, Samuel shouted again. Time's up, boy. Eli grabbed his knife, a tiny bag, a faded photo of his parents, and the last $5 he owned Ayanna moved to the window, slipped out with the grace of someone born in the wild. Eli followed. Heart hammering outside, Samuel's boots thudded. Against the dirt they ran, Ayanna limping but determined, her resolve brighter than any fire behind them. Samuel's voice roared with fury, and from the edge of the woods, darker eyes watched, calculating and waiting. The game had changed, and Eli Thompson, the orphan no one noticed, had just stepped onto the path where legends are born. The splintering sound of wood echoed as he kicked the door, but before Samuel Crow could barge in, 3 painted soldiers emerged from the undergrowth. Blocking their path to the water, the trap had been perfectly set behind them. Samuel stood. Stunned, there were enemy warriors in front, and no way left to run. Ayanna's hand slipped into Eli's, cold, trembling, yet firm. Whatever happens, she whispered, thank you for trying, but it wasn't over. Samuel raised his voice, and one of the warriors lifted his weapon, crashing through the trees behind them, and then a sound rumbled across the valley. Deep and powerful, the war horn's call echoed through the mountains. A voice like thunder answered it from above. Dozens of voices roared down from the cliffs. Takakota had found them, but would he arrive in time to save his daughter? Or only in time to find grief in the creek bed? 2 young lives stood frozen, hope clashing with fear, wondering if faith in each other had been enough. The sound shook the very earth beneath them, and the painted warriors before them paused, eyes shifting toward the mountains. Hearing the call from a dozen different directions, Ayanna's grip tightened, and for the first time since Eli had found her, her eyes shone with something more than fear. Father, she breathed, her voice quivering with relief. But the enemy did not retreat. Their leader, a tall, scarred man, lifted his tomahawk, spoke sharp words in his tongue, orders that made the others nod with grim resolve. They stepped forward, choosing to take the children rather than face the full force of Takakoteana's voice strained. They would rather kill us than face my father. Samuel Crow stumbled out of the trees, breath ragged, face red with rage, hand reaching instinctively for the pistol at his hip. Sweet Lord, he muttered. The scarred warrior turned toward him, sensing a weaker prey, and in one fluid motion hurled his tomahawk. Samuel dove, the weapon embedding in the tree where his head had just been. Stay behind me, Eli growled, stepping forward, one hand on his rusted knife, knowing it was no match for trained killers, but willing to stand anyway. Then, a whistle in the wind. The first arrow streaked past Eli's ear, striking the scarred warrior in the shoulder, spinning him sideways from the ridge above. Takakota rode down like a storm unleashed, 15 mounted warriors with fury in their eyes and vengeance in their bones descended the slope. The enemy realized too late their mistake. Surrounded and outnumbered, they tried to flee, but Takakota's riders moved like wolves, sealing every exit, cutting them down with swift, precise strikes. The battle was brutal. Over in heartbeats, 2 enemy fighters dead, Their leader captured, and Samuel Crow vanished into the woods, his footsteps the only sign of his cowboy Desedekata dismounted by the creek. Approaching with slow, measured steps, Eli still stood between him and Ayanna, defiant, protective. The chief was larger than Eli expected, a towering figure carved by time and loss. His eyes unreadable as he studied the boy. Ayanna broke from Eli's side and ran to her father, speaking fast in her language, explaining everything. Takakata listened, his gaze never leaving Eli's face. When she finished, silence fell, stretched tight like a bowstring. "You saved her life," the chief said at last, his English clear, his voice low and steady. "You chose to help when others would have turned away." Eli's voice cracked, dry as the dust around them. "She needed help. That's all." Something flickered in Takakota's eyes, almost amusement. "You risked everything for that." Before Eli could answer, one of the warriors approached the chief, murmuring urgent words in their language. Takakota's expression darkened when the warrior stepped back. Takakota turned to Eli again. "A scout from your town brings word," he said. "Samuel Crow spreads lies, says you conspired with the enemy to kidnap my daughter. Your people are ready to hunt you down as a traitor." Eli's knees felt weak beneath him. He had saved Ayanna, done everything right, but still lost everything. "Where will you go now, Eli Thompson?" Takakota asked. "Your people call you enemy, but I call you friend." "But what does friendship mean?" the chief continued. "When all of Cedar Hollow wants your blood." Eli looked away, the weight of choices pressing heavy. "I don't know," he admitted, barely a whisper. Takata studied him, then turned to Ayanna. They spoke quietly, and she turned to Eli, eyes bright, speaking words that brought nods from the gathered warriors. "My daughter tells them you risked your life for her." Takakota said, "That you faced Samuel Crow and 3 enemy fighters to protect someone you barely knew."